The alarm cut through the lab before I even had time to sit down. Red light pulsed along the ceiling panels, and every alien student in the room froze except me, because I did not yet know what that color meant on this station. Containment breach, Professor Yethar said, her voice tight. Sector 4, the specimen chamber. I had walked into xenobiology class carrying a cat carrier, expecting a calm afternoon of show and tell. Instead, the floor trembled under a distant impact, and the lights flickered once before steadying again. Vex grabbed my arm with 2 of his 4 hands. That chamber holds a Korin. It is not something you want loose in a station full of soft-bodied students. What is a Korin? A predator from the deep continent of my world. Fast, silent. It hunts by sensing warmth through walls. I looked down at the carrier in my hand. Biscuit, my orange tabby, was already awake, ears up, tail flicking in short, sharp movements. Cats notice things before people do, and right then, his whole body had gone still in that specific way that means something is wrong. The professor tried to seal the lab doors, but the panel sparked and refused to close. The blast must have damaged the locking mechanism. We are exposed. Doskin backed toward the far wall, his gelatinous pet trembling and turning a pale shade of blue, which Sella told me meant fear. The Threnol pup that Vex had brought pressed itself against his legs, shaking. We need to get everyone to the upper corridor, Yethar said. There is a reinforced door there. Move quickly, but do not run. Running triggers a Korin's chase instinct. We started moving in a tight group, students pressed close together, footsteps careful and quiet. I kept Biscuit's carrier against my chest, and I could feel his weight shift as he leaned toward the open corridor ahead, nose working, whiskers forward. A low sound rolled through the vents above us, somewhere between a growl and a scrape of claws on metal. Everyone stopped walking at once. It is close, Vex whispered. Sella's glidewing let out a nervous chirp, and she quickly covered its beak with her hand. Too late. Something answered from the ventilation shaft, a deep chuffing noise that made the hair on my arms rise. Move, Yethar said, no longer whispering. Now. We ran. I know she said not to run, but instinct beats instructions when a growl like that echoes behind you. The corridor stretched ahead, lit in flickering red, doors sealed on either side, offering no shelter. Then the Korin dropped from an open vent grate directly in our path. It was larger than I expected, built low to the ground, with plated skin the color of wet stone, and eyes that reflected the red emergency light like 2 burning coins. It did not roar. It simply crouched, muscles coiled, watching us with patient, hungry stillness. Everyone froze. Sella's glidewing went silent. Doskin's pet turned fully white with fear. Vex stepped in front of the Threnol pup, shielding it with his own body, even though his hands were shaking. I had nowhere to run, and no weapon, and no plan. All I had was a cat carrier pressed against my chest, and inside it, Biscuit was pushing his paw against the mesh door, trying to get out. Do not open that, Yethar said quietly. Whatever is inside will only become a second casualty. I looked at the Korin. I looked at my cat, and I made a decision that felt insane even as I did it. I opened the carrier. Biscuit stepped out onto the corridor floor with the unbothered calm of an animal who has never once considered himself prey. His tail was low, his ears flat, but his eyes were locked on the Korin with a focus I had only ever seen when he spotted a bird through the window at home. What are you doing? Doskin hissed. Trust me, I said, though I had no idea if I should trust myself. The Korin's head turned toward this new small shape. For a heartbeat, it seemed to consider Biscuit an easy target, something to swat aside before continuing toward the larger prey behind him. It took one slow step forward. Biscuit did not retreat. He arched his back, puffed out to nearly twice his normal size, and let out a sound I had never heard from him before, a long, rising hiss that seemed too large for such a small body. It was not fear, it was a warning. The Korin paused. In the wild, the professor told us later, predators are wired to avoid unnecessary risk. A strange animal that does not flee, that instead grows larger and louder and holds its ground, signals danger the brain cannot immediately classify. It is a gamble every time, but it works often enough that evolution kept it. The Corin's coins for eyes narrowed, uncertain now. It let out its own low growl, testing. Biscuit answered instantly, a sharp defensive swipe through the air, claws catching the emergency light for one flashing second. He did not touch the Corin. He did not need to. The message was simple. Come closer and find out what happens. For 3 long seconds, nothing moved. I could hear my own heartbeat and nothing else. Then the Corin shifted its weight back, uncertain, and let out a low, chuffing retreat call. It turned, quick and low, and slid back into the open vent it had dropped from, disappearing into the dark shaft above. Nobody moved for several seconds after that. Then Yethar let out a breath I did not know she had been holding. "Seal that vent," she said into her communicator, voice shaking slightly. "The predator has withdrawn to Sector 4. Send a containment team immediately." Biscuit sat down in the middle of the corridor and began licking his paw, as if nothing at all had happened. Vex slowly lowered his arms from around the Threnal pup. "It walked away," he said, disbelief thick in his voice. "A Corin walked away from a fight." "They avoid unclear risk," Yethar said, still catching her breath. "Your companion did not behave like prey. It behaved like a rival predator defending territory. The Corin has likely never encountered a species that responds that way instead of freezing or fleeing." Sella knelt down slowly and looked at Biscuit with new eyes. "On my planet, when something small stands its ground against something large, we have a saying, small does not mean weak. It means we have never met your teeth." "He does have a chipped one," I said, and for the first time since the alarm sounded, someone actually laughed. It broke the tension in the corridor like a released breath. The containment team arrived minutes later, moving in careful formation, with sealed capture equipment. They secured the vent, tracked the Corin's heat signature back to the damaged specimen chamber, and confirmed it had returned to its original enclosure on its own, apparently unwilling to test its luck twice in one day. Once the danger passed, the professor gathered us in the upper corridor to make sure everyone was unharmed. Doskin's pet slowly returned to its normal color. The Threnal pup pressed itself against Vex, calmer now but still watchful. Sella's glidewing finally spoke again, muttering something in its own language that Sella translated as a nervous joke about needing a very long nap. I picked Biscuit up, and he allowed it without complaint, purring immediately, completely unaware that he had just talked down an actual predator with nothing but posture and noise. "You said your species keeps these as companions," Yethar said, studying him carefully. "Not as guardians, not as trained protectors." "No training at all," I said. "He just does this. It's instinct." "Instinct," she repeated slowly. "A creature bred purely for companionship still carries reflexes sharp enough to face down an apex predator without hesitation." "He's not fearless," I said. "He's just confident. There's a difference. He genuinely believes he can win, even when he probably can't. That confidence alone is usually enough to make the other side think twice." Vex looked down at Biscuit with something between awe and unease. "Your species did not just tame a small hunter. You built companionship around something that refuses to consider itself small." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe we just got lucky that the ones who acted like that also happened to like being scratched behind the ears." The Threnal pup finally worked up the courage to sniff toward Biscuit from a safe distance. Biscuit gave it one slow blink, the closest thing to a peace offering he was capable of, and settled back down in my arms, tail curling once before going still. Later, after the corridor lights returned to their normal color and the whole station calmed down, Yethar filed her incident report with a note about companion species and unexpected defensive behavior. She told me privately that the footage from the corridor cameras would likely be studied for cycles to come, since nothing in the university records showed a Korin retreating from an animal so much smaller than itself. Walking back toward the dormitory that evening, Vex kept glancing at the carrier in my hand, now closed again, Biscuit curled inside and already dozing. Would it always do that? Vex asked. Face something so much larger without running. Every single time, I said. He did it to a dog 3 times his size back home. He did it to a vacuum cleaner. He does it to me when I try to give him medicine. Vex considered this for a long moment. Your planet must be a strange place to grow up, surrounded by creatures who refuse to know their own size. I looked down at Biscuit, sleeping peacefully after facing down an actual predator without so much as raising his heart rate for long, and smiled. You have no idea, I said. And honestly, neither do we half the time. We just keep him fed and let him think he's in charge. Turns out that arrangement works out pretty well for everyone.